So, how well do you think you know social psychology? Well, this will be a cerebral quiz on societal influences on cognition and behavior, so strap yourself in. Let's see if you can get all 16 correct. Question 1. When trying to persuade someone, which of the following strategies would be the most effective? Presenting only your opinion, presenting both your opinion and the opposition's arguments, presenting only the opposition arguments and then refuting them, or presenting both your opinion and the opposition arguments, then refuting the opposition's arguments. The answer would be D. Question 2. In relation to the autokinetic effect, which of the following is true? Only close-knit groups develop... Don't worry, I will explain the autokinetic effect. Like, if you haven't heard of it, if you don't understand any of the questions coming up, I will provide an explanation. So you'll be able to understand what's going on. So these are the following answers. So only close-knit groups develop norms, only groups with diverging views develop norms, even randomly created groups develop norms, and the autokinetic effect has nothing to do with the development of norms. Which one is it? Well, the answer is even randomly created groups develop norms. Isn't that interesting? Like, you can throw a bunch of people who don't know each other from different cultures and they will always develop norms. So the autokinetic effect. So humans, this is the autokinetic effect is, you see this is moving. It's not actually moving. The reason is this is because humans use a reference point to recognize anything. If you have a fixed bright dot in a dark room, it will appear to move because there is no reference point. Psychologists saw that individuals reported different answers when on their own, but when combined in a group changed their answers. The subjects conformed to group norms, often without even realizing. Group norms were established by finding an intermediate position, the extreme positions moving towards the middle. So that's quite interesting. Question 3. A psychologist argues that racism and prejudice are caused primarily by people's needs to enhance their self-esteem and to feel good about themselves. This psychologist's explanation is most consistent with the fundamental attribution area, social identity theory, the self-serving bias, or realistic conflict theory. And the answer is social identity theory. Now let's have a look at all 4 of these in detail. So the fundamental attribution area. In social psychology, the fundamental attribution area, FAE, also known as correspondence bias or attribution effect, is the tendency for people to underemphasize situational and environmental explanations for an individual's observed behavior, while overemphasizing dispositional and personality-based explanation. This effect has been described as the tendency to believe that what people do reflects who they are. That is, to over-attribute their behaviors, what they do or say, to their personality, and under-attribute them to the situational context. It involves this type of circular reasoning in which the answer to the question, why would they do that, is only because they would do that. Although things like personality differences and predispositions are in fact real, the fundamental attribution error is an error because it misinterprets their effects. It wrongly ascribes unduly supreme importance to them. Social identity theory. This is the portion of an individual's self-concept derived from perceived membership in a relevant social group. The self-serving bias. This is any cognitive or perceptual process that is distorted by the need to maintain and enhance self-esteem or the tendency to perceive oneself in an overly favourable manner. When individuals reject the validity of negative feedback, focus on their strengths and achievements, but overlook their faults and failures or take more credit for their group's work than they give to other members, they are protecting their self-esteem from threat and injury. Put this in perspective. Let's observe a student who attributes earning a good grade on an exam to their own intelligence and preparation, but attributes a poor grade to the teacher's poor teaching ability on a fair test question. So this person is exhibiting a self-serving bias because there seems to be a strange contradiction between negative results. Only the good results are because of them, and only the bad results. They're serving themselves to. They're only telling themselves what they want to hear. So they're kissing their own ass, essentially. Realistic conflict theory. The theory explains that intergroup conflict can arise due to the competition among groups over scarce resources and conflicting goals. Not very nice. That doesn't have good results. So if the reason this isn't FAE is because FAE would state that racism and prejudice is due to a personality trait, not self-esteem. Doesn't make sense. Social identity would state that these traits are due to an individual associated with the identity of the group, which races and prejudice are accredited to. So say if you're Caucasian, then you will be racist and prejudiced people who aren't white. So this does align with social identity theory. The self-serving bias doesn't make sense here, neither does realistic. They just don't make sense. Question 4. Recent reinterpretation of the Milgram experiments from a social identity perspective have. There's a lot of words there, so pause the video, have a guess, but the answer is that they suggest that the behavior of participants, the Milgram paradigm, should not necessarily be described as following orders. Now, hopefully I do explain it. Okay, so Milgram experiment, in case you don't know about it. I explain it here, but do I do any more? No. If you're not familiar with the Milgram experiment, it was based off the idea of the Holocaust, why people would do such unspeakable things to other people. So this experiment was designed to mimic the ranging extents of authority to understand human obedience. Are people sheep? Are they not sheep? Are they conformists? Are they non? What's going on here? So that was the point of the Milgram experiment, and it involves electric shocks and silent people. Very good thing to watch. I don't want to steal, the joy of actually. It's not joy. What I mean, excitement. I think would be a better way to put it. In unsync. Just go on YouTube, have a look. They still have the original clips. So what's Stanley? Let's read this first. So the outcome of the experiment is not primarily based on how the individual followed orders, but also due to the proximity of the experimenter, which may have induced in social identity theory, the person identifying their role in accordance with the experimenter, and how close the individual was to the person undergoing the shock treatment. If it was primarily based on following orders, the proximity of the scientist in the white lab coat and of the victim receiving shocks wouldn't matter. The person would still be obedient. So I guess this is good news. It means we're not sheep. I mean, we kind of knew that already, but here's proof. It's a Milgram experiment. This is what Stanley Milgram said. So nothing is bleaker than the sight of a person striving, yet not fully able to control his own behaviour in a situation of some consequence to him. I hope you're not about to go to bed, because that, not the nicest thought. Alright, question 5. Katrina wants to encourage her daughter Evelyn with regards to her maths performance, and so she suggests to Evelyn's teacher that all the female students should take the test without any boys in the classroom. Katrina also supplies her daughter with information about strong female role models who are famous mathematicians. What is Katrina trying to reduce? She is trying to reduce stereotype threat. So let's have a look at all 4 of these. Discrimination. Discrimination is the act of making unjustified distinctions between people based on the groups, classes, or other categories to which they belong or are perceived to belong. People may discriminate on the basis of race, gender, age, religion, or sexual orientation, as well as other categories. Discrimination especially occurs when individuals or groups are unfairly treated in a way which is worse than other people are treated on the basis of their actual or perceived memberships in certain groups or social categories. It involves restricting members of one group from opportunities or privileges that are available to members of the other group. I think that the last dot point sums it up, and so does this photo. So in group favoritism, evolutionary explanation. So this is the shortcut definition. So the tendency to respond more positively to people from our in-groups than we do to people from out-groups. That is the definition. It's pretty much what we need to know. But if you're more interested, in-group favoritism with evolutionary explanation, the way this works is because our ancestors lived in small social groups that were frequently in conflict with other groups, it was evolutionary functional for them to view members of other groups as different and potentially dangerous. So differentiating between us and them probably helped to keep us safe and free from disease, and as a result the human brain became very efficient making these distinctions. The problem is that these naturally occurring tendencies may lead us to prefer people who are like us, and in some cases to even unfairly reject people from outgroups. So an example of this today, because we're not in hunter-gatherer days, is AFL brawls and Aussie bars based on who supports what footy team. Okay, it happens. If you're not Australian, this stuff happens over sport teams. Okay, stereotype threat is a situational predicament in which people are or feel themselves to be at risk of conforming to stereotypes about their social group. It is purportedly a contributing factor to long-standing racial and gender gaps in academic performance. Since its introduction to the academic literature, stereotype threat has become one of the most widely studied topics in the field of psychology. So here's an example. Why you suck at maths, some person, it's just a guy. No stereotype there, he's just saying that this individual is bad. But now, this one here is female, and this person's like, okay, all girls suck at math. It's not this individual, just all girls suck. So the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is a psychological phenomenon by which people tend to develop preference for things merely because they're familiar with them. Such as psychology, this effect is sometimes called the familiarity principle. In studies of interpersonal attraction, the more often someone sees a person, the more pleasing and likable they find that person. So, taking all of these things into account, you can now see why Katrina wants to encourage her daughter Evelyn in regards to a math performance. It's just trying to prevent stereotype threats. There's nothing to do with any of these other three. Oh, jeez. I'm glad I'm learning about this. Alright, question 6. The fundamental attribution area is to the self-serving bias as, pause the video, have a think, but the answer is, other is to self. So, yes, makes sense if you understand the concepts, and I've explained all of them. So, FA can sense errors and judgments of other people by not considering situational factors and self-serving bias, attributing things which are good to one's contribution or bad things to someone else. So, other to self makes the most sense out of all of them. Whoa. So it asserts that people develop their attitudes when there is no previous attitude due to the lack of experience, considering the emotional response is ambiguous by observing their own behaviour and concluding what attitudes must have caused it. The theory is counterintuitive in nature, as the conventional wisdom is that attitudes determine behaviours. Furthermore, the theory suggests that people induce attitudes without assessing internal cognition in mood states. The person interprets their own overt behaviours rationally in the same way they attempt to explain other behaviours. This is self-perception theory. That is what's going on there. I don't know why I didn't say anything about it. Okay, I'm explaining dissonance here. So a state of conflict occurring when beliefs or assumptions are contradicted by new information. Dissonance theory holds that the conflict produces feelings of discomfort, which the individual seeks to relieve by reconciling the differences, by convincing themselves that they do not exist. So attribution is perceiving everyday experiences being internal or external, while attitude is the fixed way of thinking about things. So, as you can see, others to self is the most reasonable answer. So self-perception theory asserts that the answer is people infer their attitudes from watching their own behaviours, just as they do when watching others. Question 8. In subsequent experiments examining the factors that influence conformity, Solomon Asch determined that. Now this is also something that you should read up about, but essentially, if you read the content, you'll know that the answer is B, that conformity increases group size, went from 1 to 4 or 5, but further increase in group size did not increase conformity. Interesting. Question 9. Someone has just opened a new restaurant near your university, and you've been convinced to walk around for 3 hours on a very hot day, carrying a big heavy sign advertising this restaurant. According to what theory, prophecy, or reciprocity, you would probably rate this activity as the most enjoyable or the least boring. Someone paid you $1 or $100 to do it. Well, the answer, if you've read the material, is that it would be cognitive dissonance theory, and it'd be the most entertaining if you paid $1 to do it. Why? Well, because if you're paid only $1 and you're doing all of this work, you need to provide a reason for doing all of this work. That's your cognitive dissonance kicking in. So you decide, okay, this $1 will be worth it if I make it fun. It's not optimism, it's dissonance, okay? You be careful with this stuff. So I go into more detail here. This is very funny when you get it. So in the field of psychology, a cognitive dissonance is the perception of contradictory information. Relevant items of information include a person's actions, feelings, ideas, beliefs, and the things in the environment. Cognitive dissonance is typically experienced as psychological stress when persons participate in an action that goes against one or more of those things. According to this theory, when two actions or ideas are not psychologically consistent with each other, people do all in their power to change them until they become consistent. The discomfort is triggered by the person's belief clashing with new information perceived, when the individual tries to find a way to resolve the contradiction to reduce their discomfort. So this picture here, my desire to be well-informed is currently at odds with my desire to remain sane. Why this is funny is because what most people have done is that I'm too scared to explain that. If you get it, good. If you don't get it, it's okay. I don't want to disturb you. Okay, the self-fulfilling prophecy. A self-fulfilling prophecy is a socio-psychological phenomenon of someone predicting or expecting something, and this prediction or expectation coming true simply because the person believes or anticipates it will happen, and the person's resulting behaviours align to the full belief. This suggests that people's beliefs influence their actions. The principle behind this phenomenon is that people create consequences regarding people or events based on previous knowledge of this subject. So, a great quote by Howard Zinn is that pessimism becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It produces itself by crippling our willingness to act. So if you don't believe in yourself, then you're not going to put any effort in. So it cripples your willingness to act. So a little bit more reading on the self-fulfilling prophecy. So we haven't looked at that. So this is the main thing I want to focus on. For example, if you immediately wake up and think, perhaps for no particular reason at all, that today's going to be a terrible day, your attitude might make your prediction come true. You may unconsciously work to affirm your belief by ignoring the positive, amplifying the negative, and behaving in ways that are unlikely to contribute to an enjoyable day. So this concept appears regularly in culture and art, and plenty of examples that can be found in literary works, especially Oedipus. The norm of reciprocity. This is a social norm where if someone does something for you, you then feel obliged to return the favour. Everyone's done this. Even I have. So, I explain question a little bit more in detail so now you understand all of this. So you are being paid nothing to do this job, so instead of focusing on how painful it is and how it is wasting time, tell yourself it's okay if you have fun. Dissonance. Okay, question 10. Which of the following best represents the proofable route of persuasion? If you've done your reading, pause the video, then you would have chosen B. A person is persuaded because of non-message factors such as communicator attractiveness. So here's good old Simpsons. Who doesn't love the Simpsons? Thank you, Rupert Murdoch, for putting this in. So, essentially, the central route to persuasion occurs if arguments are compelling and the attitude change that is long-lasting and resistant to change. So you want to mainly work on the central route to persuasion. Proofable route occurs if peripheral cues are compelling, attitude change that is temporary and susceptible to change. So think of all of the advertisements you see with famous actors. You may like that perfume temporarily, but after time that perfume it doesn't feel as good, and then you go back and you keep shopping to keep retaining that feeling of amazement that you always initially have, but all you're being subject to is a endless cycle of the peripheral route of persuasion, which is why you should educate yourself. Okay, rant over. Question 11. Research suggests that which of the following faces would be rated as most attractive? Interestingly, a composite face of multiple faces have been digitally blended to produce an average face. This is the most attractive. Question 12. Jill blames her brother for imagined wrongs that he has committed against her and views him in such a way that his human characteristics are de-emphasized. Both of these factors would best be considered as different types of what that will make it more likely that Jill will what? The answer is self-justifications, and she will act aggressively. So, all self-justification is, it describes how, when a person encounters cognitive dissonance or a situation in which a person's behavior is inconsistent with their beliefs, hypocrisy, that person tends to justify the behavior and deny any negative feedback associated with that behavior. So, essentially, when Jill keeps doing this, she will act more aggressively towards her brother, which is not good. Make sure you don't do this. Question 13. During the US election, Facebook would use a specific algorithm to push stories that had either a Democrat or Republican favor, depending on stories that the Facebook user had previously liked. This type of information would feed into the what bias of the individual. The answer is confirmation bias. Let's look through all of these biases. So political bias is a bias or perceived bias involving the slanting or altering of information to make a political position or political candidate seem more attractive, with a distinct association with media bias that commonly refers to how a reporting news organization or TV show covers a political candidate or policy issue. Pretty sure I've gone over the fundamental attribution area, but it has another name, which is the correspondence bias or attribution effect, which is when people underemphasize situation and environmental explanations for an individual's observed behavior while overemphasizing dispositional personality-based explanations. Confirmation bias is just a tendency to search to interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. Question 14. Under which of the following conditions are we most likely to make a situational attribution? So the answer to this one is when consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus are all high. Yes, I do. So situational attribution is the process of attributing someone's behavior to external factors. There are a million reasons why someone would be late to an interview, right? Maybe the bus was late, or the kids were being fussy at home, or they pulled over to save someone's life on the way to the interview. So, in order for us to make a situational attribution, we need consistency. We need the person to be consistent in what they're doing. There needs to be a distinctiveness to what's going on, and consensus. They're all high. Question 15. Richard Lapierre, 1934, used a young Chinese couple as confederates to conduct a field experiment that demonstrated that... The answer is... people's attitudes do not correlate well with their actual behaviors. Interesting study. Should read up on it. Okay, so what social influence involves conforming in order to be accepted by others, or to avoid social rejection? Whereas something social influence occurs when people conform to the behavior or opinions of others because they believe that these others have accurate knowledge and know what is right. Which one is it? Well, the answer is normative and informational. So normative social influence is when you conform in order to be liked and accepted. Whereas informational social influence is when you look for others for cues concerning the correct behavior. So there's a distinct difference. So you can see normative social influence involves conforming in order to be accepted by others or to avoid social rejection, whereas informational social influence is when you look to others for information. Essentially, what is right? Just rely on others. Alright, facilitative social influence. I was in one of the answers. So social facilitation is defined as improvement or decrease in individual performance when working with other people rather than alone. In addition to working together with other people, social facilitation also occurs in the mere presence of other people. Previous research has found that individual performance is improved by coaction, performing a task in the presence of others who are performing a similar task, and having an audience while performing a certain task. Isn't that interesting? So, there is facilitative social influence in me explaining the content for my exam here. It is improving my odds of doing well. Alright, and that is it. That is all 16 of the questions. I really hope that you have learned something from this experience, whether it be for figuring out how to sing up, multiple choice techniques, or learning more just about the society you live in. Thanks for watching.